My first guest tonight has been travelling the world to kickstart the conversation on gender ideology. Chris Elston, better known by his alter ego Billboard Chris, is a father of two girls, and he says children should not be indoctrinated to believe they were born in the wrong body. And his travels have now brought him to the UK. I'm delighted to say Chris Elston joins me now. Hi, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show. So, do you want to just, for those who are watching who aren't familiar with what you do, can you just describe what your approach to your activism is?
Sure. So, I'm sure I look utterly ridiculous, but I had no platform or means to reach people, so I had some signs made, which I wear. I'm a human billboard.
Yes.
And I know these aren't the most reputable people normally, but...
It's the sandwich board thing.
It's a sandwich board.
It normally says things like, the end is nigh, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. They're normally preaching about the end of the world.
Yeah.
But I'm having conversations about the harm coming to kids. So the sign on my front says, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Yep. And the sign on my back is one little playful. It normally is one that says the definition of a dad, which is a human male who protects his kids from gender ideology.
So what specifically is your view of gender ideology, and why do you think it is so dangerous for children?
So in a nutshell, my views are that there are two sexes, there are zero genders, and there are infinite personalities.
Right.
Because that just captures all of us beautifully. There's no right way to be a boy or a girl. But this ideology teaches that just because a girl or a boy are gender nonconforming, if a girl wants to climb trees and play in the dirt and hates wearing dresses, well, guess what? She's a beautiful girl.
Yeah.
She's not a boy, she's not a trans boy, she's not anything other than what she is, which is a girl. And we need to abolish this entire ideology which teaches that stereotypes define who our kids are.
Right, so gendered stereotypes being used as the way to define what someone's gender identity is.
Right.
Where do you stand though when that gets to adulthood, when people are past the age of consent?
Look, adults can call themselves whatever they want, they can take on whatever label they want, and if they want to modify their body, that's their choice, I suppose. However, there is a caveat here. Doctors have still sworn an oath to first do no harm. And if you got some 18-year-old who comes into your gender clinic who's struggling with trauma and abuse, and there might have been sexual abuse, or maybe they have autism, or who knows what's going on in their life.
Yes.
We don't just start cutting off body parts right away. We should be treating these underlying mental health comorbidities first. And as a last case scenario, if body modification is required to alleviate this condition called gender dysphoria, well, that's a conversation for an adult to have. This should never be done with kids.
Of course, there are the problems that you're describing are often related to the idea of gender self-identification. So it doesn't even matter whether people have transitional surgery. We had a recent case in Scotland where a double rapist identified as female and was about to be housed in a female prison. What would you make of that? Yeah,
this is happening in Canada, where I'm from. We have rapists housed with women in prison. And it's like we've all lost our minds. Have we forgotten that there are bad people in the world? There are mentally ill people in the world.
Yeah.
There's evil in the world. Of course, if you take away all safeguards for women and just say any man can identify as a woman, well, of course some men are going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But in the effort to appear inclusive, these politicians pass these most ridiculous laws and they take away all safeguards for women and children.
And your particular focus is on the safeguarding of children, because to my mind there are three branches to this. There's the gay rights issue, what happens when you change the definition of homosexuality to mean same-gender attraction. There's the feminism issue, what happens when you take away women's only spaces. And then there's child safeguarding. And this is very much your focus, isn't it? And I suppose that's come from your experience as a father.
100%. I have two girls, and they're 11 and 13 years old now. I've been on this campaign for about 3 years. Traveling all around North America, but my main job in life is to be a dad. And I've lived all my fun young years. All I care about is having a good world for them to go into. And I refuse to send my girls into a world that doesn't know what a woman is, and a world that's trying to change the sex of hundreds of thousands of children. We just can't tolerate this in a society. There's
also the issue, isn't there, that the majority of those who are children who are referred to paediatric gender clinics either have an autistic element to them or grow up to be gay.
That's right.
So it goes back to your point about gender nonconformity. Why are we stigmatising that?
Right. At the Tavistock here in London, out of a sample of more than 1,000 children, 35% had moderate to severe autism. If you include the mild cases, that goes above 50%. And historically, all the studies into gender dysphoria going back decades show that more than 80% of the time, back when this just affected a handful of kids, but it was much more severe and prolonged and lasting, and it started at a young age. Even with those kids, more than 80% of the time, they simply outgrew it when they went through puberty, and a majority grew up to be gay.
Yeah.
So the cure, in almost all cases for gender dysphoria, is puberty itself, and now we block the cure.
So then what do you do when adult trans people say to you, well, I've always known. I've known since I was a small child that I was in the wrong body. I've spoken to people who say that. And there must be a degree of sympathy for people like that, surely.
Of course. We all want everyone to live the most fulfilling life possible. And I've talked to hundreds of these people. I talk to them every day. They come up to me, oftentimes yelling and threatening and sometimes assaulting me. But look, there's no such thing as being born in the wrong body. The way we should be framing this is there are people who have a mental health condition called gender dysphoria. I would prefer to call it sex dysphoria because I just don't like the term gender at all. We used to use it as a synonym for sex.
Yes.
But it's been twisted to mean something entirely different. And all of these young people especially who are being taught gender studies in university, they've come to believe that our gender is something that we perform.
Yes.
Based on stereotypes. And that somehow you're not going to find true happiness unless you alter your body to perform these stereotypes more. This is like a cult that's infected all of society, and we just need to get the truth out there because people have been too afraid to talk about it.
It's very interesting talking to you now. You strike me as very mild-mannered, not particularly combative or antagonistic, and yet people have attacked you. I mean, I don't know if you've got any footage of this, but there have been people who have actually attacked you on the street for wearing this billboard.
Yes, I've had my arm broken. I've been mobbed by 200 university students. I've been punched probably 20 times. I've probably had 40 different assaults. Spat on countless times. Arrested twice after getting assaulted in front of police.
So does this not make you want to stop? Because it's unpleasant.
No, I'm a good old Canadian boy, and I just dig my heels in more.
Because you were recently in Ireland, I think last week, and it was interesting. I saw a clip of a police officer who came up to caution you or threaten you with arrest or something? What was going on there?
Just yesterday, I was on Grafton Street in Dublin, which is the busiest street in Dublin. And the police came up to me, and apparently someone at the Disney store, of all places, had reported that I'd been inside the store.
Well, you might be a customer.
I wasn't inside the store. I had my signs on. I was outside on the street. I'd walked by the store.
Yes.
But I wasn't even hanging out in front of it or anything. And so this officer hadn't reviewed the CCTV footage or anything, so I told him, please go look at the footage.
You hadn't been in the store at all?
I hadn't been in the store at all.
No,
it's just a completely made-up fabrication. So we talked for about 6 or 7 minutes, and I knew right away this officer was a problem. And he ended up telling me that if I approached the Disney store, that I would be arrested. And he was citing some part of their criminal code where apparently if you cause offense to someone, that could mean you're violating their criminal code. And I said, well, what if I had a sign on that said, I think Ireland is beautiful? Some people could take offense to that. People from England, for example, might take offense to that. But
well, bits of Ireland are quite rough, yeah. I mean...
But he goes, yeah, that's true. I said, well, would you arrest them? So this is not policing, this is thought policing. Yes. And they have this most dystopian law of all about to come in, this new hate speech law, where even if you have something on your device that you haven't even shared with anyone, they can look at your devices and potentially arrest you.
Yeah, well, Scotland has a similar thing where they can arrest you for things you say in the privacy of your own home. And Canada certainly has some pretty draconian measures when it comes to this kind of thing. But that's a very interesting point, what you say about causing offence. As you said, and as you said to the police officer, literally anything. I could find Disney offensive. Can you go and shut that down?
Right.
I do, as it happens.
Yeah, I'm offended that they called in a false report, so can we arrest them? And I said to him, if someone's offended, whose fault is that? Whose problem is that? It's the problem of the person who's offended. Yes. Because being offended is a choice. People say 1,000 terrible, nasty things to me every day. I don't get offended. That's a choice. We need to be able to manage our own emotions and regulate how we behave. We don't just take offense to everything and, cry about every little thing that's going on in the world. But that's what these are the people who we're letting run society today and rewrite our laws and change the whole world. And now everyone's afraid to say, hey, we shouldn't even sterilize kids. Somehow this is controversial. And
the necessity for what you do is clearly that the conversation hasn't been allowed to occur. Right. Precisely because people are saying, your words are violence, your words erase my existence. Where do you think this comes from, this hyperbolic, alarmist approach to conversation?
Well, this is really all done by activists who don't want us to have a conversation because they know as soon as we have a rational, fact-based conversation about this, their whole ideology falls to pieces. So when I talk to these people on the street all the time, I ask them questions. I'm not there to... You can't change the mind of an angry person on the street. That's not going to happen. But I'll say things that they agree with because that throws them for a loop and they don't know what to do. Because I'll say, look, if a girl's gender nonconforming, beautiful. What's wrong with that? And they get so lost because they think I'm supposed to be some bigot.
Yes.
So now I've created this moment of cognitive dissonance where they have these two competing ideas going on in their head, and they're going to have to go home and figure it out. But I'll ask them questions like Matt Walsh did in What is a Woman? In that fabulous documentary, he didn't offer his opinion once. He just asked questions of the so-called world-leading experts on women and gender.
Yes.
And they couldn't even tell them what a woman is.
I do find that approach of being gentle and amenable and not taking an antagonistic approach exposes them all the more. And we've seen that with the Posey Parker Let Women Speak events, where they've ended up punching women in the face.
Yeah, and speaking of Posey Parker, she was actually the inspiration for how I got started, because the first thing I did was followed her lead. She had put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, "I love J.K. Rowling. I heart J.K. Rowling."
Yes.
And it got taken down after one day because some people on Twitter complained. And I said, because the secondary part of my campaign is freedom of speech, because we should be able to talk about issues, especially issues affecting our children's health for the rest of their lives. And I got tired of people getting fired and all that, so I put up a huge billboard in Vancouver that said the same thing. It got taken down after one day because a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech.
Or to love J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, it had a big red heart on it. And they took it down, and it got paint bombed overnight. And so then I put up about 30 or 40 more throughout the US. And then I ran out of money. And I had no way to reach people, so I quit my job. I used to have a real job as a financial guy, but I quit everything and I became a human sandwich board, just like I told my mom I would do when I was growing up.
Well, I think it's a very effective approach that you're taking. Just quickly before you go, how can people find out more about you?
BillboardChris.com, and I do all my campaigning on Twitter at BillboardChris, Instagram as well.